Hello and welcome back to Toys Thursday with Johnny Tiger on November 19, 2020. Who is this big fellow in front of the camera? Well, I imagine not too many people would have recognized him, especially looking at him from the back. This guy's name is Sabre. Yeah, like the sword, like the weapon, Sabre. And he is a minotaur, or as the story dubbed him, the evil buffalo guy. Pretty neat looking. Sabre was made for the Spawn toy line by Todd McFarlane in 1996, I believe. Might be not 95, but I'm pretty sure it was 96. Hell, he is very unique in several aspects. Aside from being one of the very few action figures that is basically a evil mutated humanoid buffalo. I mean, what other buffalo action figure can you think of? I personally can't think of any. So he has that going for him, and he's pretty big, pretty solid hunk of plastic, and pretty interesting looking. And he is possibly the only action figure I ever seen or heard of that has a nipple ring. Let me bring him closer to the camera. Nipple ring right here. Isn't that weird? This evil buffalo dude with a nipple ring. He also has some giant blade thingy attached to his right arm that he can use to chop with. And he has a huge gun or missile launcher attached to his shoulder. What's the cool thing is this thing is that you actually swivel this to target the sky or to aim forward. That's pretty cool for a toy that was made in the mid 90s. There's two versions of Saber. One was brown fur and the other was gray fur. I'm not quite sure which version I got here, so maybe someone can enlighten me in the comment section. Taking a look at him from the side view, big muscular arm with a spiked armband. Other arm, big blade with a whole bunch of spikes attached to his arm and shoulder. I'm not quite sure if these things are like part of his costume or they just grow out of him. I mean, he is a mutated buffalo after all. And if you look at him from behind, you see his tiny little tail. That's so cute. Now, of course, those of you who follow the Toy Thursday thus far know that the figure I show first is never the main focus of the episode. While Saber is not the main focus, he does have some very intricate relationship with the next figure we're going to show. But we'll get to that in a little while. Growing up in Taiwan, I was never really exposed or up to date or understanding of the whole cowboy and Indian culture or history or what was going on there. I'm guessing can't call them Indian now. It's either Native American or First Nation or Aborigine. I don't know. I tend to lose track of what is the current PC term for people right now. And as most of you know, Johnny Tiger, not very PC. So we'll just call them uh, Native American, just to be nice and middle ground and neutral. But what if they're American, eh? Or Canadian, eh? I can't call them Native Canadian. Oh well. See? That's what I mean. It gets confusing, and I get confused easily. Anyway, growing up in Taiwan, I was never really big into the whole cowboys and Native American saying the conflict and the the the, uh, the issues that were going on. However, I do remember when I was little, I had some of these little soldier toys. They weren't even action figures. They were like little plastic figurines. They weren't articulated, but you usually could get them in a big bucket, and you would have a bucket of 50 or 100 soldiers or 50 or 100 Native American warriors, and you can stage your own little battle at home. I had those. I remember seeing these painted and half-naked warriors wearing strange and elaborate headdresses and wielding spears and axes and I tried to ask my parents what they were and my parents they're like well, okay, really not PC here, but my parents said, oh, those are people from America, those are the Redskins, those are the Redskins Americans. That's what my Taiwanese parents told me. Yeah, so they didn't really know either. It wasn't until I started growing up, I came to Canada, and I started getting into my teenage years, and I started to understand a little bit more about oh, so it's not just white people here in North America. The first people here, there were the Native Americans, and there's many different tribes of them and stuff like that. I remember the first Native American character I was exposed to when I was a teenager was playing the game um, Samurai Spirits. Now, in Samurai Spirits, you get a lot of samurai, you get a lot of ninja, but they did have they had a couple of American themed characters, and one of them was this 9 foot tall giant warrior that was like a Native American warrior by the name of Tam Tam. And I remember when I played that game, I loved using Tam Tam as my character. 'Cause, he's so different. All the other samurais and ninjas, they all seem like look the same, sound the same after a while. But this giant 9 foot tall Native American guy, he could breathe fire. He could do all kind of crazy magic stuff. And it was a crazy character. I really liked him. So I started to pay more attention to if there's any representation of Native American characters in pop culture, in video games. And I'm happy to report, while it's not as many as we would like to see, I would definitely personally like to see more representation of Native American warriors and shamans and stuff like that in video games and comic book. I'm happy to say that we do have quite a handful of proud and interesting characters we can talk about. So, since I decided to tone down the amount of characters I show on each Toy Thursday, we're going to look at a couple of them today, and then look at a couple more of them next Thursday. So if you are like me, if you have always been a little bit interested and intrigued by representation of Native American warriors and uh, 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 powers and stuff like that in pop culture, then I hope you'll enjoy this episode and the next Toy Thursday episode as well. Now, back to why Sabre is here. This evil giant buffalo man. Well, I mean, that's kind of uh, obvious, right? Like, we're talking about Native American warriors, so obviously there's going to be buffalo in there somewhere. Just happened that in this case, the buffalo is the bad guy. So who is the good guy? Who is the good guy? If this giant buffalo guy is the bad guy, then who is the hero in his story? That honor go to this very dead looking, very distinguished looking dead guy right here. Like Saber, this guy was made in around 1995, 1996. He is a Spawn. Like I mentioned before, Spawn is the name of the comic book, but Spawn is also the name of the main characters. I say characters because Spawn is not one person. Spawn is a title. I think I'm not very up to date on my Spawn history, but I would say roughly every few hundred years, the forces of hell will try to pick a worthy human warrior and try to make him become the general, one of hell's elite special forces soldier, preparing for that day when Armageddon come about, when the forces of hell is going to duke it out with the forces of heaven. Um, so similarly, heaven will take every few hundred years, they will recruit someone from the mortal world, someone who is worthy and powerful to become one of the angelic warriors. But we won't touch on that too much today. We'll look at Spawn. So these worthy human souls that get recruited to fight on Hell's side, they're called Spawns. And it usually come in the form of coercion and misdirection. Usually, when a worthy warrior dies, the devil, or Todd McFarlane's comic books version of the devil, or one of the demon lords, will approach this dead warrior and will make a deal with him. Basically, these demon lord or the devil will offer these warriors a chance to come back to the mortal world to finish their unfinished business, whether it to be to watch their child grow up or to see their beloved wife one last time, or to avenge their own death to kill the person who killed them, yada yada yada. Whatever their wish, the devil will grant them the wish. In return, the soul will belong to the army of hell for eternity after they finish doing what it is that they need to do. So, okay, that is basically a brief version of what a spawn is, how a spawn is created. And unfortunately, most of the time, the devil or these demon lords, they kind of find a really uh, cheap way to get around granting you the wish. So it's like the monkey's paw. Whatever wish you wish for, they don't always turn out the way you think it's going to. For example, one of the Spawn characters was promised, said if you serve the army of hell, then we'll let you go back to the mortal world to see your wife. Well, they did, but they also make him go back to the mortal world looking like a corpse, looking like the way he looked when he got murdered. uh, which means he couldn't go near his wife, otherwise he was going to scare her to death. He basically walked around looking like a monster, so it didn't do him any good to be able to see his wife one last time. The whole Spawn history is full of trickeries like that. So as I said, this guy in front of the camera, he is a Spawn. His name is the Renegade. And if you want to find an action figure that look most stereotypical of how a Native American warrior should look, I don't think you can find one that's going to be more representative than Renegade Spawn here. Not much is known about the Renegade Spawn. The only thing that's said about his bio was this was once a proud Native American warrior whose skill with blades and archery even caught the attention of the forces of hell. So when he finally fell in battle, the forces of hell offered him a chance to avenge himself. In return, he must become one of hell's generals. And what is his wish? His wish was to come back to life long enough so he can track down the evil buffalo dude who murdered him and his entire village. Now, tell me if that story is not irony or something. I mean, this here is a brave Native American warrior who got killed fighting this evil buffalo. So he made it he traded his soul so he can come back to go hunt down this evil buffalo for vengeance. Now, when you really think about how many buffalo the Native American people had hunted and eaten, is this evil buffalo really so bad for offering a bit of slaughter and mayhem in return? Who is a good guy? Who is a bad guy here? I mean, that's some interesting philosophical stuff we can talk about. But anyway, I just thought I want to point that out. Like, a Native American warrior coming back to hunt a quote unquote evil buffalo guy who wiped out his village. Nah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, yeah. It's hard to say who is in the right, who is in the wrong, because I'm pretty sure if you ask the evil buffalo guy, he's going to say that he didn't do anything wrong. Anyway, back to Renegade Spawn. Like I said, if you want to look at a Native American portrayal in the action figure world, you can't find one that's better than this one. Look at this guy. Yeah, he looked kind of desiccated. He looked kind of like a corpse. But yeah, he just came back from the dead. You know, that's what he's supposed to look like. This guy is perhaps one of the action figure in my collection that is both really beloved. I really love him, but I also really, 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 really hate him. And here's why. I love the design of the guy. This whole Native American motif going on with his outfit. This shield and this axe in his hand and his hunting bow in his other hand. This eagle perched on his shoulder here. And these arrows that can actually come out from the quiver on his back. And as if that's not enough, he also got a hunting knife strapped to his leg. This guy's armed to the teeth, and every one of these weapons can be removed from his person. Also, his buffalo skull headdress. Yeah, look at that. This guy is blaming the buffalo for killing his people, but he's using a buffalo skull as his headdress. This is removable too. That's really cool. Like this is an action figure that is over 6 inches tall, very well built, very muscular, full of details, and has so many accessories that it's mind-boggling. He got arrows, he got archery bow, he got shield, he got axe, he got a pet eagle, he got a knife, and he got a removable headdress. All that for $8 back in 1996. No kidding, this guy, I bought him for $8. Like, there's just no way you can compare with that for action figures today. On top of that, he is also very articulated for the action figures of the time. His hips can move, his knees can move, uh, his waist can move, his neck, shoulder, elbow, wrist. He's really, really well articulated. And he is a Native American warrior coming back from the dead to hunt an evil buffalo. Anyway, you know. Um, so that like all that add up to why I really, really like this action figure. But why do I really, really, really hate him? You probably would notice that I even while I'm pointing out his weapons and pointing out his articulation joints, his joints and stuff like that, I'm barely touching him. I don't even want to touch this guy. Because he is one of the few action figures that just refuse to stay in one piece. Like honestly, I have seldomly come across an action figure as annoying as this one. Like you can you can walk a little bit too heavily through the room, and he's going to drop his axe, or something is going to fall off of him, or his ego is going to fall apart, or his arm's going to fall off. Like this guy is in my native Taiwanese language, we have a description called Lili Lala. Lili Lala means all over the damn place. Like you can't even look at him the wrong way, otherwise everything falls off of him and it's going to take you 10 minutes to get things back in his hand and his shoulder and his head, and next time you jostle the table, things drop off again. I actually have to resort to a lot of sticky tapes to make sure that things stay on relatively solid, so I can at least move him around like that. But personal preferences and dislikes aside, this was a very good representation of a Native American warrior, and in such unexpected place in a Spawn comic book and Spawn as a Spawn character. That was really, really, really cool. I was surprised and delighted to find this guy and his nemesis, Sabre, the evil buffalo dude. And that would not be the only time that Todd McFarlane made a Native American warrior character. Around year 2000, on the 10th year anniversary of Image Comic, Todd McFarlane made 4 exclusive action figures to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Image Comic. And one of those 4 characters turned out to be our next Native American warrior that I'm going to show you today. His name is Robert Bearclaw, codename Ripclaw. When he was growing up, Ripclaw grew up looking very different from his other Native American tribespeople. Every time he asked his father about why his skin was so much more pale than his fellow tribesmen, his father evaded him and told him that that's just the way things were. It wasn't until when he was a teenager that Robert Bearclaw's mutation started to show. He suddenly developed the ability to transform his hands into deadly animal-like claws, and that scared him so much that he ran away from his tribe. During his travel, he was discovered by some secret government agencies that had some idea that they could cure his mutation by cutting off both of his hands. Ouch! And after cutting off his hand, they gave him a pair of robotic prostheses that supposedly could act like normal hands. Unfortunately, that did not cure his mutation at all. In fact, Robert Bearclaw's mutation was so strong that his body managed to assimilate the new robotic hands, and these robotic hands soon was turning into these mighty claws as well. Eventually, Robert joined the secret superhero team called Cyberforce and took the code name Ripclaw. His mutation include, well, the ability to turn his hands into deadly claws. To he's also able to grow his teeth out like the teeth of a bear, and he can have the speed and power of wild animals, and he has a healing factor that allows him to heal from wounds that can otherwise kill him. Eventually, he found out the reason that he looked different from other Native American warriors is because he actually was a descendant from an old native tribe from thousands of years ago. And his destiny was to be the protector of all Native American tribes. He has undergone um, ceremony that gave him these blood red tattoos all over his super pale, super white skin. And he has black hair and red eyes. This is one weird looking dude. But honestly, a lot of that uh, was only realized by me after reading his background. Going by tactile alone, going by feel alone, this guy was like, the ideal kind of guy for the way I like my warriors to be. He has long hair, long hair, yay for long hair, yeah. Look at that. His hair, my hair. Love that long hair. He's immensely muscular. Just look at the muscles in his legs. I mean, we see a lot of muscular shoulders and muscular arms in superheroes, but quite often the legs are neglected. But look at the legs on this guy. That's some super ripped legs. And he has these really cool bladed claws for his hand. With this guy, just like, for me, as far as tactile go, it's just really cool. Uh, Obviously didn't know about the pale white skin and red eyes and bloody tattoos all over him and all that stuff until I read it. So yeah, just a little bit of discrepancy between tactile knowledge and visual knowledge, tactile impression and visual impression. Unlike the Renegade Spawn that we showed, uh, Ripclaw here, he's not very well articulated. He's basically a very good looking statue. His arms can kind of move a little bit left to right, wrist can move, arm can move up and down. The joints are really tight. I'm trying not to break anything. The legs can move at the hip a little bit. The waist can move and the neck can move. But nothing can really change his pose. Maybe you can change the pose of his arm a little bit, like this arm can go like forward and up or with the elbow back like this, poised to strike. But you can't do much to change his pose. He's basically like a good looking statue. But he does come with a pretty large display base that is simulating a patch of forest floor with like a dead tree in the background that he can stand on. He's a good sized figure, pretty solid, pretty hefty, especially with his large display base. And in year 2000, I acquired him for $13. $13. I mean, this guy for $13 and the Renegade Spawn for $8. And then you look at what the kind of action figure we're getting today in year 2020, that an action figure half of the size of this guy is going to cost like 29 bucks. I mean, is that crazy or what? As unconventional as Ripclaw is, he definitely doesn't really even look like a Native American warrior. Um, what with his red eyes and white skin and uh, this kind of all this blood red tattoo thing going on. Well, I mean maybe that part is kind of like Native American, but anyway, despite not looking as conventional as Renegade Spawn, he's still a very good representation of a strong, proud Native American warrior in the comic book. And on top of that, that is just one good-looking muscular action figure. So that's why he deserved a spotlight in today's episode. Like I said, next Toy Thursday we're going to look at two more proud Native American warriors that managed to make it into comic book and action figure form. Thank you for checking out today's Toy Thursday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Fitness Friday. For now, have a good night.